Zajac.
Zajac. Where's the picture? Pictures first.
The picture is that's
there,
it.
right? And the tab with the PDFs.
Yeah,
Is this one?
Yes. Yeah. There you go. I printed an order of the correct.
Ah, very nice.
Okay, you want to maybe move or drop to your right?
Right. Center.
Beautiful. Right, we're good.
Good.
Nice.
Good morning. Erev Shabbos, we are doing today's Shloshim Prakim Rambam. Perek Tezvav Tazayin Yud Zayin of Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh. Man, what the Rebbe wanted by putting all these prakim together in one day, I'm not sure, but we're going to do it. We are going to do it. Okay. So, what's happening today? In today's prakim, we are doing adjustments to the moon. That's the topic. How do we identify the precise position of the moon on the sunset or right after the sunset on the night following the Moiled, so we could know whether we're going to see it or not? Yesterday, we learned that the moon, before we even get to precise location, the moon has two mean or average locations. One is the center of that little epicycle that's moving along the larger circle, and one is the moon on that little epicycle itself. So ultimately what has to happen is we have to correct the distance between the two. We have to figure out the distance between that the middle of the epicycle and where the moon is on the epicycle. The Rambam is going to give that to us in the end of Perek Tezvav. First, we have to adjust each of those positions. It's not like we can say that the center of the epicycle is here, the moon is here, figure out the distance. First, where exactly is the center of the epicycle and where exactly is the moon on the epicycle? So yesterday we adjusted the center of the epicycle by saying that it was not at the time of sunset, but 20 minutes after sunset. That was the adjustment. Today, Perek Tezvav, we're going to adjust the moon on the epicycle. There's a little tiny adjustment that has to happen. Here's what I'm going to do though. Since the Rambam, this is one of the most debated parts of the Kiddush HaChodesh, this beginning of Perek Tezvav. So let's read it inside. Let's see what the Rambam actually says, and then let's try to explain it a little bit. Perek Tezvav Halacha Aleph. If you want to ascertain the true position of the moon at any day that you want, you need to first deduce, bring out for yourself, where is the center of that epicycle going to be at the time of sighting, which is 20 minutes after sunset, which is exactly what we did at the end of the last Perek. So you find the center of the epicycle's position at that time. You also need to figure out where is the moon on the little epicycle, but the average before the correction, which is about to happen. Just where would it moves 13 degrees per day clockwise? Where would the moon be on that little circle? Also get emtza hashemesh lo'isei ha'es, the position of the sun on its orbit for that time. Yesterday we learned that there's the position of the sun on its orbit, and then there's the true position of the sun how we see it from Earth. The Rambam is going back to the position on its orbit. That's the one that's important for this calculation. So you got three things. You got the center of the epicycle, you got the moon on the epicycle, and you got the sun on its orbit. Then the tigra emtza hashemesh me emtza hayodeach. Subtract the sun's position from the center of the epicycle's position. In other words, find the distance between them. It's a simple scientific way of saying, right? If the sun is at 10 degrees and the moon is at 20 degrees, by subtracting the sun from the moon, you subtract 10 from 20, so you get the distance between them. V'hanishar, whatever you get, the remainder, tichpel oisai, double it. V'zeu hanikra merchak hakafel. This is called the double distance. So the distance between the sun and the moon doubled. Okay.
What is that? What is that number? The doubled measurement.
What? Like, why do we care about it?
No. What is it?
It's double the distance between the sun and the moon.
In your example, it sounded, just in that, you said it was 20 degrees
Sun's at 10 degrees.
Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The center of the epicycle is at 20 degrees.
Right.
The distance between them is how much?
10.
10. Double that is
20.
20. Okay, so we need that 20 for some reason. As we're gonna
We have a number 20.
we have number 20. We have merchak hakafel. We have a double distance. Okay, what do we do with this double distance? So first, the Rambam tells you how big this double distance is going to be. You should know it's automatic since we're only dealing with one night in the month. Halacha beis ukvar hedanu. We've already notified you. All the calculations that we're coming to do in these chapters are only are only to know whether the moon could be sighted. So therefore, I'm going to make it easy for you in a way. Forever. On the night you're looking for, the night of sighting, it's impossible that this double distance will be it's going to be somewhere on the span of 5 to 62 degrees. So know that. It's impossible to add to that or to subtract from that. Basically, what I'm saying in other words is the distance between the sun and the moon can only be between 2.5 and 31 degrees. That's why the double distance will only be between 5 and 62. And that makes sense because in the night of the Mila, there's the beginning of the month, they're so close together. So the closest they could be is 2.5 degrees. The furthest they could be is 31 degrees, causing the double distance to be 5 or 6, between 5 and 62 degrees. Therefore, says that I'm only going to give you what's relevant between 5 and 62. Since the matter is such, he's bringing the merchak zakafel. Take a look at this double distance. If the double distance is only 5 degrees or a little bit near there, we don't have to add anything. You're good. And we'll go to the next step in a moment. But if you find the double distance to be between 6 and 11 degrees, here's what we want. Then you're going to have to add to the position of the moon on its epicycle 1 degree. Whatever you know the moon to be on that little circle, just add 1 degree. Put it 1 degree further. If the double distance is from 12 to 18 degrees, you have to add to the moon's little cycle 2 degrees. Between 19 and 24 degrees of double distance, you have to add to the moon's little cycle 3 degrees now. Between 25 and 31 degrees of double distance, add 4 degrees to the position of the moon on its epicycle. If the double distance is between 32 and 38 degrees, add 5 degrees now to the moon's position on the epicycle. Between 39 and 45 degrees of distance, add to the moon on its epicycle 6 degrees. Between 46 and 51, then you add 7 degrees to the moon's position on its epicycle. Between 52 and 59, then add 8 degrees to the moon's position on its epicycle. If it's between 60 and 63, should say 62 because it's only 62 maximum, then add 9 degrees to the moon's position on its epicycle. Whatever you reach the moon's position after you add these degrees, that's considered the true position of the moon on its epicycle. So what have we done here? We've gotten a double distance, right? We've gotten distance from the sun and the moon, doubled it. Based on that double distance, as it got bigger, we added more space to the moon on its epicycle. That's what happened in these halachas. Why are we doing this? So, like I said, this is a huge debate in the Mefarshim, but I'm just going to give you one approach. Okay? There's a lot going on in this photo. I know it. So I'm going to share the screen here, and I'm going to bring this up, and I'm going to try to walk through this as quickly as we can. Is the photo clear? All right. Here's the thing about this merchak hakafel. So we have a couple of moving parts in this diagram. This outer circle here, and I'm focusing now you see there's a bunch of lines, line circles, and then there's whole circles. So that small circle on the top, that's the sun. This little circle here, line circle here, that's the epicycle of the moon. So that little dot in the middle is the Emtza HaYareach, that's the center of the epicycle. And this bigger dot, that's the moon itself.
Can this photo be enlarged a little bit?
A little bit, let me try. How's that?
Okay, a little better. Okay.
Yeah, it's not, yeah, I'm trying my best here.
Fine.
It's fine. So again, sun, moon's epicycle, that's the center of the epicycle, that's the moon. Now, this black dot in the middle, this is Earth. Okay? I wish there was more color here. This big circle with lines is the moon's orbit. That's the path along which the epicycle travels, counterclockwise this way. Now, like we said earlier in the Rambam, all of the orbits are off-center to the Earth. You can see that this large dotted line is off-center relative to the Earth. This circle here is the path, essentially, which this orbit follows. If you watch this orbit moving in space, it would make this little circle. So that the furthest point from Earth is here one day, and the next day, as you can see, which is this big circle, this is considered the next day, now that point is over here. And if you would follow it moving, it would basically follow this circle that goes around the Earth, clockwise.
So wait, so what is that non-dotted line, the straight, the thick line circle?
This one here?
Yeah, what does that represent?
That's the moon's orbit after one day. So the dotted line represents all the positions on day one. The circles all present the positions on day two.
So you have all these circles moving one each day. It moves.
Well, they all move in different directions. See, on day one, everything is aligned. Let me see if I can show a little bit of a color version for this. Here's a color version for this. Okay, that's everything. We'll call that a Moiled position. Everything is aligned. Sun is here. Moon's epicycle is there.
Sorry, on the screen share, I'm still seeing the other picture. Maybe
Really?
Stop share.
I have to stop the share. Oh, and do a different window.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
I've seen online there are these animations of the
Yes, exactly. So here's everything aligned. This is position on day one. Sun is here, moon is here. That's the epicycle, but everything is directly aligned. The center of the epicycle, the moon. This is the moon's orbit. Since it's diagonal, you can't tell that it's off center, but it's off center. And that's the Earth. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this little dot here is the center of the moon's orbit. That's why it's off center of this circle. This point here is a very important point. This is called the Nakuda HaNeichichis, the equidistant point. It's a theoretical point that the scientists measured from Earth to the opposite side of Earth, which is the same distance as from Earth to the center of the moon's orbit. Okay? The reason that's important is because when the moon's orbit makes a circle, it's going to reach that line. See, it's going to essentially follow this little path here. Okay. Let's go.
Even in those days, they didn't even know the Earth was round.
Well, we knew because the Torah says it.
Yeah, but I mean,
so the Rambam factored it all in. Yeah, the guy maybe didn't know. So let's go back to that photo because that's the more important one. I know it's confusing and a lot of black and white here, but the dotted lines represent that color picture you just saw. Day one, everything is in position. On day two, watch what happens. The sun moves on its path 1 degree counterclockwise. I know this is enlarged to scale. So the sun moved 1 degree. The center of the epicycle, like the Rambam said yesterday, moved 13 degrees. So you can see it moved much further than the sun. At the same time, the moon moved 13 degrees on its epicycle clockwise. And so did the entire orbit move 11 degrees clockwise. So 2 things moved counterclockwise, 2 things moved clockwise. The sun and the entire epicycle of the moon moved to the left. The moon itself on its epicycle moved to the right, and so did the entire larger orbit move to the right.
It moved to the right 11 degrees, so it only moved 2 degrees.
Oh, very good. So that's why we have to say, as the Mefarshim pointed out, this actually moves 24 degrees. See, the epicycle actually moved 24 degrees So that's why the Rambam says it only moves 13 degrees, because he's factoring in this opposite movement as well. Okay, so that's why I'm calling it 13 degrees for the total. But you're right. From its original point, it moves 24 degrees per day, except that the entire orbit is pulling it 11 degrees the other way, so we just call it 13 degrees. But watch what happens fascinatingly. What's 1? What's 13 minus 1? 12. What's 11 plus 1? Also 12. So this is just the way it works. And the Mepharshim is right. This is without a reason. This is how it works. How it works is every day, the distance between the furthest point on the moon's orbit, the goiva of the moon's orbit, and the epicycle is double the distance of the sun and the moon. That's just how it happens. Because if every day this moves 13, this moves 1, and this moves 11, so you're creating a space of 12 degrees per day. Next day, it's another 12, but it's going to be always equal. It's always double the distance. So the distance between the sun and the moon, double it, is the distance between the moon and its own apogee. At every Mailad, they come back together. At every Mailad, everything meets. The top of the moon's orbit, the moon, it all meets. That's why we started off with doubling the distance, because double the distance revealed to us the position of the moon's apogee. And why is that relevant? So now we know why we're looking for double the distance. What's the significance of double the distance? But how will knowing this help us anything? So here, the Mepharshim struggle immensely to explain how this works. Some Mepharshim say it's just Hashem. There's no reason for this. Today's contemporary science will tell you it's the gravitational pull of the sun. In the beginning of the month, as the moon is pulling away from the sun, the gravitational pull is much stronger. But the point is, the moon's walk on this epicycle is disturbed. It's disturbed by a little bit. Something moves it around. And so what you have to figure out is how far did the moon get from the top of its orbit to know how disturbed it got.
What do you mean by disturbed?
But disturbed means it's going 13 degrees per day.
In a circle.
In a circle.
Yeah.
But in the beginning of the month, something is making that 13 degrees go off. Something is disturbing that epicycle. So that when the
Is that
moon,
always 13 degrees?
it's always more.
When the moon is aligned between the earth and the sun. Something.
And then for the first couple of days after that, is what we're saying. For the first day, essentially. For the first day after that. So you can see here, and what's the context of the disturbance? The context of the disturbance is that see this dotted line here? That represents where the top of the epicycle was at the Mailad, 0 degrees of the epicycle. When we said the moon moved 13 degrees, it moved 13 degrees relative to this point. But the problem is that through the disturbance, this whole epicycle kind of moves, and now this becomes 0 degrees of the epicycle. So essentially the moon has moved 14 degrees or 15 degrees, depending on how far the double distance is. So somehow the double distance accounts for this disturbance. Okay. Some of Hashem say again, it's a siba b'loy tam, it just comes with no reason from the Eibishter. Some people say it's a gravitational pull. The way the Rambam's Mefarish, the classic one, he kind of explains that somehow as the moon's orbit moves to the right, that moves what 0 degrees is on the epicycle. You can kind of think about this in like physical terms. Remember yesterday I said that when something moves along a circle, so the top always remains relative, right?
Yeah.
But if that circle that this is moving along itself is moving, then that will disturb a little bit where the top is.
I'll have to check into this. There are these certain points in space called Lagrangian points where you're in that point, you don't need to. There's no pull from other bodies. You can just kind of stay there, and it could be maybe that might be one of those points. And
maybe I'm no NASA expert, so. But the point is that the moon, when what we called yesterday, let's say it moved 13 degrees from this point on its little circle, but because of this disturbance, it's going to look like it moved 14 degrees or 15 degrees, and that disturbance is measured by the double distance. So once we figure out the distance between the center of the epicycle and the top of the moon's orbit, now we could know how much to add over here.
Why are you you're adding?
You're adding because if 0 degrees moves backwards, your position becomes larger. If you move 13 degrees from here, that's 14 degrees from here.
So you're not moving the moon's position, you're moving its
Position in relationship to what is called 0 degrees. In other words, the addition in halacha gimel is accounting for this angle right here. And it's either from 1 degree, you see, all the way up to 9 degrees. So it's a pretty big disturbance. And that gives us the precise position of the moon on the epicycle. And now we can correct the angle between this and this. That's what we ultimately want. We want to know where will the moon be seen on the ecliptic. We used to think, right? We used to think it was going to be over here. So we'd be following the center of the epicycle, we'd see this. But because the moon is actually here, we're going to see this point. That's going to be what matters. So we first corrected where this was. Now we corrected where this is. And now that we have the correction, says the Rambam in halacha daled, the achar kach, afterwards, tira kama miles hu amasal anochin. See how many degrees is that path. In other words, in reality, how far is the moon on its epicycle? If it was less than 180 degrees, then subtract the angular correction that I'm going to give you in a moment from the center of the epicycle. If the result of the moon on the epicycle comes out to be more than 180 degrees, then then add the angular correction which I'm about to give you to the center of the epicycle. Whatever that result comes out to be after you subtract or add, is the true position of the moon for the time of sighting. And you should know that if the position of the moon on the epicycle comes out to be at 180 exactly or 360 exactly, it has no angular correction. Rather, the mean position is the true position. Again, we can see this over here very clearly. I'll show you, let's see, the double distance. Where am I? Here, right? Depending on where you find the moon on its epicycle. So if it's between 0 and 180, that's on this side. So whatever the angular correction is going to be, you're going to have to subtract it because it's going to be seen earlier on the ecliptic. But if it's past 180 degrees, then you're going to have to add whatever angular correction because that's going to be seen later on the ecliptic. If it's exactly at 180 or 360, it's going to be seen at the exact same position on the ecliptic, and therefore there's no reason to correct anything.
Ecliptic is the moon's position.
Ecliptic is this. The Galgal Hamazalis is called the ecliptic. So we talk about the sun's position relative to the ecliptic, the moon's position relative to the ecliptic, etc. Okay. So what is exactly the angular correction? The Rambam is going to give us the angular correction for all the distances between 0 and 180, and then we're going to be able to apply it proportionally to 180 to 360. Halacha vav, v'kama hu menas hamaslo. How much is the angular correction based on the moon on its epicycle? Im yiyeh hamaslo hanochin eser miles. If it's 10 degrees on the epicycle, pia menaseh chamishim chalakim. The angular correction is 50 chalakim. That means that the moon will actually be seen 50 minutes earlier, not in time, but in space, then the center of the epicycle would be seen. If the moon's position on the epicycle is 20 degrees, then its angular correction will be 1 degree and 38 minutes. A 30-degree progress on its epicycle will yield is a 2-degree and 24-minute angular correction. If it's 40 degrees on its epicycle, it's now 3 degrees and 6 minutes of correction. If it's 50-degree angle, it's 3 degrees and 44 minutes of correction. A 60-degree progress, then it's 4 degrees and 16 chalakim. A 70-degree progress, the correction is 4 degrees and 41 minutes. An 80-degree progress, is now 5 degree of distance of correction. The 90-degree angle is the highest angle. It's the highest correction of 5 degrees and 5 minutes. If it's 100-degree progress, interesting that it's now more. So there probably should be a correction here. 5 degrees and 8 chalakim. If it's 110 degree of distance, we're going down. 4 miles, 4 and 59. 4 miles and 20 minutes. 130 degrees. 4 degrees and 11 minutes. 140. 333. 150 degree progress. 3 degrees and 48. 160 degree progress. 1 degree and 60 and 56. In 170 degree, is 1 degree and 59 minutes. In it's 180 degrees exactly. It has no angle, no correction. The position of the center of the epicycle is exactly the position of the moon in its true position. If it's going to be more than 180, I'm not going to give you the table. Just subtract that number from 360, and you will already know the angle of correction because it's proportionate. It goes both ways down the circle. As you did with the sun. If you find that the progress is in the 10, so it's not 10 or 20 or 30, it's 15 or 25 or 35. Take from the proportional correction between the two uniform angles that you know. So if you know 10 is this much, 20 is that much, if it's 15, take half of that correction. As we explained in the path of the sun and its angular corrections, so too you could do on the path of the moon in its angular corrections. And the Rambam makes everything practical again for his year. Ketzad, how do we apply this? Now we're moving. Yesterday's example date was the 14th of Tammuz. Today we're moving backwards to the 2nd of Iyar. So we have 3rd of Nisan is the Shnasa Ikar, is the starting point. We're going 1 month later. 2nd day of Iyar. From this year. But the number of complete days that have passed from the night of starting point till the night of this one that we want to figure out where the moon is, Tisha ve'esrim yom, it's 29 days. So, find the position of the sun. We're following now the whole parak. So find the sun first. You will see it to be at 35 degrees, 38 chalakim, and 33 shniyas. Siman lamed hey, lamed ches, lamed gimel. Where will the moon's center of the epicycle be? 53 degrees. 93, 36, and then 39. Simanam nun gimel lamed vav lamed tes. And also find the moon on its epicycle's position. It's 103 degrees, 21 minutes, 46 seconds. Simanam kuf gimel chaf aleph mem vav. Tigra emza hashemesh me emza yarech. Subtract the sun from the moon, so we have the distance. Yishar shva esrei milas shmeina b'chamishim chalakim m'sheish shniyas. 17 degrees, 58 minutes, 6 seconds. V'zehu hamerchak. That's the distance. Tich beloisei, double the distance. Yitzelecha hamerchak akafel. The double distance, which again is the center of the epicycle to the top of the moon's orbit. That's what we're looking for. Is 35 degrees, 56 minutes, and 12 seconds. As we said before, because of the disturbance, we have to count for the disturbance. So we're going to move the moon forward by 5 degrees. Again, not really moving the moon forward, but moving the top of the orbit backwards so that the distance becomes greater. But the point is the same. And now the proper position of the moon on its epicycle will be Meo Shmeinim or Shmeina minus 108 degrees, 21 minutes. We don't really care about the minutes. So we essentially have 108 degree progress of the moon on its epicycle. Following halacha zayin, halacha vav, sorry, ubanu lachker. We're going to, in halacha test, we're going to follow halacha vav. Banu lachker al menazeh hamaslo anochi. We want to find the angular correction for this progress. Shahu meo shmeina nimtzes mana shaloi. It's going to come out that the angular correction is chamish mailis v'chilik echad 5 degrees and 1 minute. Well, the fisha hamaslo anochi upachas meo shmeina. Since the progress is less than 180, tigra hamano. We have to subtract the angle because that means the moon is going to appear earlier on the ecliptic. Shu chamish mailis v'chilik echad and emtzay yareach. 5 degrees behind the center of the epicycle. Yishar, that will remain at Shmeina Barbayim Milas, Shleisho Shleshim Chalakim, 48 degrees and 33 Chalakim. Metesha Shleshim Shniyas, and we don't really care about that. So Tasa Shniyas Chelek, just convert the seconds into a minute. The Tesif Chalakim, And now we have the true position of the moon at this hour is Mazel Sher, Shmeina Esrei Milas, Shisho Shlishim Chalakim, and Milas Chasre. At 18 degrees, 36 Chalakim of the 19th degree, Simanam Yudches Lamed Vav Derech Hazeh, and using this way, Teda Mekema Yereach Hamiti B'chol Esrei Yesher Tirtza, you can know the true position of the moon at any time that you want. Mitchila Shana Zu Shehi Iker Ad Seif Ha'ilam, from the beginning of time, or from this year, which is the Shasa Iker, till the end of time. So, to review in short what we just did, is we know that the moon has two positions, center of the epicycle and on the epicycle. We corrected each one in relationship to itself. Then we corrected them in relationship to each other. And now we have the moon's true position. Okay? No, we don't. Perek Tezayin. Not yet. There's still more to go. What's more to go? What's more to go is that the entirety of the last 15 prakim has assumed that the sun and the moon run on the same plane of latitude as well as longitude. In other words, the distance between the sun and the moon, or for us this way, because sunset, right, going downwards, from east to west, is a longitudinal difference. And when I say that all these distances, how far is the sun from the moon, it means along the ecliptic. We'll call it longitude. But the truth is, that we're going to see now, that the moon is also off in latitude. So we were assuming that here's the belt of the Mazoles, right? The sun and the moon both run equally through it. But no, the sun runs equally through it. The moon has a little bit of an inclination, upwards and downwards. Let's see if I can find a picture of this.
Does this have something to do with the fact that the moon is closer to the Earth instead about the...
No. This is just it's a matter of the inclination. I'm not sure if you can tell it from this picture. See if I can share the screen here. Can you see how the moon is actually, this is the moon's orbit. It's inclined even more than the ecliptic. The ecliptic is inclined 23 degrees from the equator. This is inclined 5 degrees further. Right? So you see how it's 5 degrees north, and 5 degrees more south, lower. Okay? Which is going to cause more headaches for us. So what we have to do in this perek is, that's all about the moon's latitude. But here's what, let me maybe say it outside and then we'll go inside. This phenomenon that the moon is inclined further than the ecliptic means that there are 2 points, they're called the Rosh and the Zanav, the head and the tail. There are 2 points where the moon's orbit meets the ecliptic. Like any 2 circles which cross, there's going to be an angle, going to be the two intersecting points. Right? If you have a circle and another circle, there's 2 points where they meet.
Yeah.
And then for the first 180 degrees, from one point of departure to the other, it's going to be inclined northerly. And for the rest of the 180, it's going to be inclined southerly. Right? It would be simple if it ended there. We have to always now account. We just figure out where the moon is, and wherever it is, we'll just make it a little more north, a little more south. And that means that when we're going to see it in the sky, we're going to see it a little more to the right, a little more to the left. Because west is that way, let's say. So, right, north, this would be south, this would be north. Just know where the moon is going to be, more north or southerly. Here's the problem. The problem is that the entirety of the moon's orbit is circling. So the northerly inclination could be anywhere. It's not like it's inclined further north than the northerly mazoles and further south than the southerly ones. It's constantly turning. So at any point, it could be 5 degrees more north or 5 degrees more south. The points of Rosh and Zanav are themselves moving. It's not like the Rosh, in this picture, the Rosh is aligned to 0 degrees. You can't see 0, but that's the concept. Maybe you can see it more over here. You can see more over here, right? So the Rosh is aligned to 0 degrees. The Zanav is aligned to 180 degrees. And then we just say from 0 to 180, the moon is higher. From 180 to 360, the moon is lower. But no, this entire thing kind of shifts. So that it's always inclined 5 degrees to the ecliptic, but it could be any way. Am I being clear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, 5 degrees, that's the max.
But that's the max. That's the max. So let's see this inside. Perek Shisha Asa. Ha'igula, sheseveves ba ha'yareach tamid. The orbit upon which the moon cycles, kinoita me'al ha'igula, sheseveves ba ha'shemesh tamid. Is actually further inclined to the orbit that the sun is moving around them. Half to the north, half to the south. There are two departure points, two meeting points opposite each other, at which the two circles intersect. And if the moon is found exactly on those points of Reish and Zanav, so it's circling on the same plane as the sun. But if the moon will depart from one of those 2 points, so essentially it's more northerly relative to the sun or more southerly relative to the sun. The point at which the moon departs and begins to go northerly relative to the sun, is called the head. And the point at which the moon goes southerly, that's called the tail. This reish itself is moving. It has a steady pace, no addition, no subtraction. It's going in the ecliptic backwards, which basically means clockwise. From Aries to Pisces, from Pisces to Aquarius, and so it goes constantly. How much does it go constantly? So we're going to get first daily rate of progress. The mean progress of the Reish on one day is 3 minutes and 11 seconds. So for 10 days, that gives us 31 minutes, 47 seconds. In 100 days, it moves 5 degrees, 17 minutes, 43 seconds. Excuse me, Simonum, hey, Yud Zayin, Men Gimel. In 1,000 days, we have 52 degrees, 57 minutes, 10 seconds. Simonum and Beis, Yud Zayin, Yud. In 10,000 days, the remainder, in other words, it goes around 360 a couple of times, but the remainder is 169 degrees, 31 minutes, and 40 seconds. Simanam, Kuf Samach Tes, Lamed Aleph Mem. For 29 days, how much does it go? 1 degree, 32 minutes, 9 seconds. Simanam, Aleph on the base test. In a regular year, it goes. 18, 44, 42. Where was it at the starting point? On the night of Thursday, Shua Iker. It was at 180 degrees on the ecliptic and 59 minutes and 28 seconds, which essentially means it was the exact opposite of this picture. The Reish was here. The Zanav was here. Here the Reish is at 0. The Zanav is at 180. In the other one, it was the opposite, which means that the northerly inclination was relative to the southerly mazales. See, we'll call these the northerly mazales. They're the ones that are inclined north of the equator. And this half is the southerly mazales, the ones that are inclined southerly of the equator. But it's interesting that on the southerly inclination, we had a northerly latitudinal difference of the moon. Verstehst?
Oh yeah, that's pretty good.
Okay. So says the Rambam, so if you want to know the location of the Reish again is the meeting point between the moon's orbit and the ecliptic. Get their rate of progress for that time, as you would with the sun and the moon. And subtract the emtza from 360. The reason why you can't just say where it is because it's moving clockwise. The way we identify the ecliptic is from 0 to 360 this way, but it's moving this way. So if it moves 10 degrees, it's really at 350. So the way we do it is we just minus the number of the progress from 360, and we get to its location. Just a simplified way of subtracting clockwise progress from counterclockwise movement. And whatever remains is the place of the Reish, and exactly half a circle across, 180 degrees across, is the location of the tail. Ketzad, how do we practically apply this? We want to know where is the Reish on the 2nd of Iyar of this year, which is the starting point. So the number of days that has passed till this night, we want to know where the Reish is Tisha B'Esrim Yad. 29 days have passed. So figure out the location of the Reish based on how you know. Add its rate of progress for 29 days on the starting point. So the Reish will now be brought to be at Meo Shtayim Ushmeinim Milas, 182 degrees. Tisha V'Esrim Chalakim, Mesheva Shleshim Shnias, Simanon Kuf Bebeis, Chav Tes Lamed Zayin. Tigra Emtzazah Mishlesh Meis V'Shishim. Subtract that number from 360 Yishar Lecha, Meo Mesheva V'Shivim Milas, Shleshim Chalakim, Shlosh V'Esrim Shnias, 177 degrees. 30 minutes, 23 seconds. Simanam Kufay and Zayin Lamed Chav Gimel. Zehu Mekayim Haraish. That is the location of the Reish. V'al Tifna Lashnias. Nimtza Mekayim Haraish. B'Mazel B'Sula. So the Reish therefore is in the Mazel of Virgo. Sheva V'Esrim Milas. Shleishim Chalakim. 27 degrees in, and basically almost at 180. Mekayim Azan of Kenegdai. And the place of the tail is opposite it. The Mazel Dagim in Pisces. B'Sheva V'Esrim Milas. Shleishim Chalakim. As the Rambam repeats, La'olam always. Yeh Ben Haraish Ben Azanav Chatzi Agalgal B'Sheva. Between the head and the tail is half the ecliptic. Whatever constellation you find the reish to be in, the zanav will be exactly 7 miles away, or 7th including it. The exact same degree point and the exact same minute point. If the reish is at 10 degrees at 1 mazel, the zanav will be at 10 degrees from the 7th mile from it. So now, you've determined where the departure points are. You've determined where the meeting points are between the sun and the moon, between the sun's ecliptic and the moon's orbit. Now you have to figure out how far is the moon off of that. Because the inclination could be a maximum of 5 degrees. As you go upwards, you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger till 5 degrees, lower and lower and lower till 0 degrees. Down, down, down till 5 degrees, down and then up back till 0 degrees. It's going to be somewhere there. So the Rambam says, now that you know where the head is, where the tail is, that's the 2 meeting points of the moon's orbit and the position of the moon, check them out. If the moon comes out to be positioned on the head or tail, then you have to know that there is no further inclination. The moon isn't more northerly or more southerly because it's going on the same plane as the sun. But if you see that the moon's position has surpassed the place of the Reish, it's going towards the tail, know that the moon now has a northerly inclination. But if the Reish has surpassed the tail, and it's approaching the head, you can therefore know that the moon has a southerly inclination. This inclination, which the moon is inclined to the north of the sun or to the south, is called the width of the moon. See, in Rambam, longitudinal difference is called oirech, length. Latitudinal difference is called reichav, width. So now we're talking about the latitude difference of the moon. So it's called reichav hayareach. If it was a northerly inclination, nikra reichav tzfani, that's a northerly reichav. If it's to the south, nikra reichav dreimi, it's a southerly reichav. If the moon was at one of the meeting points, it will not have a reichav, will not have any latitudinal difference, as we've already explained. Now, what's the maximum inclination? I said before 5 degrees. The Rambam says it now clearly. Never will there be more of a latitudinal difference than 5 degrees, whether to the north, whether to the south. This is the way. The sun begins at the meeting point and distances itself little by little, increasing the distance until it reaches a 5-degree inclination. The yachzer, the yiskarev ma'at, and then it goes back and little by little gets closer. There's no bit to the point that when it reaches the tail, it has no width. The yachzer, the yisrachik ma'at, then it goes a little bit further. And the distance increases till it reaches 5 degrees. The yachzer, the yiskarev, then it gets closer again. Till it once again has no latitudinal inclination. Im tirtza leida. If you want to know, indeed, and you have to know how much is the latitudinal inclination, and whether it's northerly or southerly. So you first need to figure out where is the meeting point and where is the moon and the distance that they've traveled. Subtract the position of the Reish from the position of the moon. And again, this method of subtraction reveals to you the distance between the two. If the Reish is at 10 degrees and the moon is at 20 degrees, subtracting 10 from 20 will yield you 10. That's the distance that the moon has traveled from the Reish. The remainder is called the path of the latitudinal inclination. In other words, how far is the moon on this inclined orbit of it? If you find the number to be between 0 or 1 and 180, that means that the moon is inclined to the north. And if it's more than 180, the moon is inclined to the south. And if it was 180 or 360 exactly, the moon has no latitudinal inclination, and that's it. No further correction is needed. Then, once you know where exactly the moon is on its path, figure out what is the angular correction of that reichav. It means how much to the north or how much to the south is it appearing. That will give you the southerly or northerly inclination, as we've said. So the Rambam gives us now the numbers. In other words, we're figuring out how far the moon is off of the ecliptic, somewhere between 0 and 5 degrees. How much is the angular correction made for the path of the moon on its orbit? If you find that the moon has traveled 10 degrees away from the Reish, its angle is now going to be 52 minutes. I mean, it's 52 minutes further north than the sun. If it's 20 degrees, its correction will be 1 degree and 43 chalakim. If the distance from the moon to the Reish is 30 degrees, means it's 2 degrees and 30 chalakim to the north. If it's 40 degrees, it's 3 degrees now to the north and 13 chalakim. It's going to be 3 degrees and 50 chalakim. If it's 60 degrees of distance, it will be 4 degrees of northward inclination and 20 chalakim. If it's 70 degrees of distance, it's 4 degrees and 42 chalakim. We're almost to the highest angle. At 90 degrees, that's when it reaches the ultimate distance of 5 degrees of inclination.
Didn't you say before that it's moving where the north and south point is?
Mm-hmm.
So even if the moon is 10 degrees, how do we know for sure what that inclination is?
Oh, so this distance is between the moon and its Rosh. Which is its meeting point with the sun.
But the meeting point moves.
But the meeting point moves. So it's always to a maximum of 5 degrees from the meeting point. So you figure out where the meeting point is, then figure out where the moon is based relative to that. And based on that distance, you have to add somewhere between 0 and 5 degrees.
We already calculated how to find the starting point.
Right. That's the Rosh. He just told you where it is, and then you just follow its progress. It goes to a daily rate of progress of 3 chalakim. So just move it along. And it goes that way. Okay. So now the Rambam's table, by the way, is built on 90 degrees. He only gives you the numbers from 0 and 90, because the rest of the circle is just proportionate. From 90 to 180, it's just going back down from 5 to 0. From 180 to 270, it's going up from 0 to 5, but now it's southerly. And then from 270 to 260, it's going again down. So it's the same principle. So the Rambam says if there's individual numbers with the tens, take whatever belongs to them based on the difference between the two corrections. As you did with the sun and the moon. If the distance was, let's say, 53 degrees, you already know. Had it been a 50-degree difference, it would be 3 degrees and 50 minutes northern inclination. If it was 60 degrees, so what's the difference between the two? Is 30 minutes. That's 3 minutes per degree. The nimtza which is it will be 53. So you add 9 more chalakim. It will be a 3 degree and a 59-minute angular northerly difference. Do the same with every number. Once you know till 90, you can now know the angular correction. For all the numbers, between 90 and 180, just subtract the number from 180, whatever remains, because it's the same distance from 0 upwards to 180 upwards. That will give you the position of the inclination of the moon at the beginning of this night. And it comes out to be, okay, they move this halacha over here all the way to the end. Delete those first 2 lines. Let's start from the Chenim Haya Hamaslo. The Chenim Haya Hamaslo Yasram Meo Shmenim and Musayim Meshivim. If it was between 180 and 270, Tigra Mimenu Meo Shmenim. Then subtract 180. Whatever remains, you know the correction. Between 180 and 270 and 360, Tigra Ese Mishlesh Mes Vishishim, just subtract 360, whatever remains, you know the angular correction. So the Rambam just applies it, Ketzad. It was 150 degree of progress. Subtracted from 180, that's the 30 degrees. You already know the angular correction for 30. Is 2 degrees and 30 halakim of northerly inclination. And so to 150 will be because again, 30 degrees is off from the meeting point, just like 150 degrees is off 30 degrees from the meeting point. It's just going 2 different ways. So whatever 30 is, that's what 150 is. Whatever 40 is, that's what 140 is. Whatever 30 goes upwards till they meet at 90 degrees. If it was 200 degrees of progress, subtract 180 from it, remains with 20. You already know the number for 20 is 1 degree and 43 halakim. So to over here, it will be 1 degree and 43 halakim. If it was 300, subtracted from 360. You have 60 remaining. You already know the angular for 60 degrees is arba minus esrim halakim is 4 degrees and 20 halakim. So too for 300, it will be arba minus esrim halakim. It will be 4 degrees and 20 halakim. And follow the same instructions for all numbers. The idea again being that circles are proportionate. So whatever is the angle from 1 to 90 will be the same from 180 to 70. Whatever is the degree from 90 to 180 will be the same from 180 to 360. It follows itself. What if we want to figure out for our starting point, second day of Iyar, where is the moon inclined? Latitudinally, is it northerly or southerly? So we already know we already know that the moon is at 18 degrees of the mazel of Taurus, which is 48 degrees into the ecliptic. We know where the meeting point was at that night. It's at 27 degrees in Virgo. That's 177 degrees into the ecliptic. Subtract the position of the Reish from the moon. So we have a distance of Masayim, Achas, or Shleishim Milas, Shishtar Chalakim, a distance of 231 degrees. Siman Reish Lamed Aleph Vav. We don't care about the Chalakim, we just go with the degrees. The Nimtzeis Hamana Shal Maslo Zeb, so using the mathematics which we've already delineated, we come to a Reichav of Shalish Milas, Shleisha v'chamishim chalakim, 3 degrees and 53 chalakim of distance. V'zehu reicha v'yareach. So here's that line from the last halakha there. This is the latitudinal difference of the moon. And it is a southerly inclination. Because the maslo is more than 180. So we've reached for our starting point of the reicha v'yareach, that night was a southerly inclination. We don't go back to this reicha for a little bit now. But the point is that we had to know that the moon, besides for being, let's call it like this. This is the circle of the ecliptic. So we have to know how far is the sun from the moon on that circle. But we also have to know how far is the moon this way. That was Perek Zayin. Till Perek Zayin is this distance. Now we just did this distance, or this. It's going to be the
5 degree max.
5 degree max, lower or higher difference. And now we get to Perek Shiva Asar, the most complex Perek, and we give ourselves a great 45 minutes for this. Hope it's enough. Okay. Perek Yud Zayin, Kol Hadvarim Sheikdamnu, everything that we have prefaced until now is Kedei Sheyu Asidim Umuchanim Lidia Sariyas, only so that it can be ready for us to know whether we can sight the moon. If you want to know on the night following the Moed, will I see the moon? You must begin calculating as follows. Notice there's no more emtsas anymore. No more mean paths. We've done all that previously. Now we're going for the truth. Give me the true position of the sun, true position of the moon, and the position of the Reish, which means the distance between the moon and its meeting point. All
Relative to Earth.
relative to Earth, and all for the time of sunset. L'shas hara'iyah.
In Yerushalayim.
In Yerushalayim. Subtract the position of the true sun from the true moon. The hanishar, and what remains, who hanikra oirech rishon, is called the first longitudinal difference. This is the beginning of the period. We're finding the distance between the sun and the moon. How far, if the sun is at 100 degrees and the moon is 105, the distance is 5 degrees between them.
What do we say the maximum that they can be distant from each other by the mother?
So in Perek Tezvav, we said it's between 2.5 and 31 degrees.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to see here that I'm going to say a bit of a different number. And unfortunately, point out the problem, but that's because in Perek Tezvav, it was talking about the average position. This is the true position. The true position has to be between 9 and 24. We'll see in a minute. So, let me see if I can bring this up here. Yeah. Okay. Let's get that in a second. The first longitudinal difference. Then, once you know where the meeting point of the moon is and where the position of the moon is, figure out how long is that distance, and whether there's a northerly or southerly inclination, which is called the first reichav. Keep these close to your heart. Keep the longitudinal difference and the latitudinal difference close. In other words, what's going to happen in this period is as follows. We've reached the true position. We know exactly where the sun will be set in the ecliptic and where the moon in the ecliptic. We just have to know, are they far enough that after sunset, the moon will still be above the horizon for enough time to be sighted. So we get the initial distance, but as we're going to see, there's going to be 4 layers of adjustment that have to happen to that. In other words, it's not exactly that simple. The distance might be a little bit smaller, might be a little bit wider, based on a number of different factors. So that's why you start off with the oirech rishon. It's called first because there's going to be a second, a third, and a fourth. We're going to adjust it, and it's going to get smaller and bigger as we go along. And also the latitudinal difference is going to get smaller and bigger as we go along. So that's why we have our oirech rishon and reichav rishon. In other words, it's the starting point. The initial longitudinal and latitudinal differences.
So just so I understand, the oirech matters, meaning if the reichav is distant, shouldn't it be that if sunset happens, then it's not being blinded by the sun? You should be able to see the moon regardless of how far it is from the sun. No?
Okay, so what most people, maybe the whole oirech, I'm describing oirech and reichav from a position of the orientation where the North Pole and the South Pole are on top and on bottom. Right, so we're watching the sun and moon go around the earth like this. We're saying this is the longitudinal difference, this is latitudinal difference. But in reality, it's the opposite. We're on the earth. We see east and west over here. North Pole and South Pole are these two ends. So oirech essentially means this way. Sun is going down, sunset. Where's the moon? How far is the moon from it? How much do we have till setting time? And reichav is this way, north or south inclined.
So really what matters is the oirech.
Well, both matter, as we're going to see. Both matter because mainly is the oirech. Mainly you want to know how long you have. But if you know that, let's say there's this degree of distance, but the moon is actually over here, so it could set earlier or it could set later, as we're going to see in the period. Based on north and south, could dictate earlier or later shkia for the moon. So that's what we care about.
Just to be clear, this whole thing you just mentioned, it's about being able to see the moon after the sunset, right?
Before moonset.
And that's at the beginning of the night.
Beginning of the night. It's only the beginning of the night, 20 minutes after sunset. You don't have much time. It's a small window.
So when a couple of days ago, when we were learning the Rambam, and was talking about the idea of them seeing it on the night before the 29th, like going into it, that would be what you're talking about now?
Same thing. Also beginning of the night, yeah.
You're talking about what Bedni was able to have a shoot before sunset.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, exactly.
You see, people do pay attention, Rabbi Lipsker.
I'm sorry?
They're retaining, they're remembering. They're asking good questions.
Even in Kiddush HaChodesh, sometimes the memory works. So we have the initial, we have the initial distance both in length and in
Why
width.
they look so red?
I gotta check. I'll change my filter. I don't know. Maybe I'm embarrassed that I don't have any questions.
Both in longitude and in latitude. Let's see halacha gimel. The Rambam is going to give us a fact, and then I'll try to explain it. Check out this initial longitudinal difference. Those last words should be deleted. We're looking at only at the eirach. Basically, the initial distance in longitude will already spill the beans for you. It's that initial distance is already going to tell you whether you'll be able to sight the moon. If it's smaller than a certain distance, if it's 9 degrees or less of distance, you know for sure you're not going to see the moon. It's too close. You don't need another calculation. If it's more than 15 degrees of distance, it's too far. It'll for sure be seen. No need for further calculations. That word Rabbi should be deleted. It's between 9 and 15. That's the window where more corrections are needed. You have to follow all the calculations until you know whether it could be seen or it could not be seen. So again, less than 9, no possibility. More than 15, absolute possibility. Between 9 and 15, that's the window of correction. However, that's only half a year.
Window of correction means it's possible that it was seen, possibly not.
Right, and you're gonna have to follow the next 21 halachas in this period to figure that out. In other words,
and B'shasei Hariyah, would we assume that the Beit Din knew all these calculations, and therefore when the Eden came, they were able to?
They knew everything.
They knew if these guys really were able to see it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
Yep.
You said before, it's not that based on the think of liars, it's just that they saw something.
Yeah,
that
maybe
looks like
they saw a cloud, maybe they saw everything.
Clouds joining together. So
Right.
coming in, they knew.
The whole thing was rigged. The whole thing. Based on knew already whether you're right or wrong. As soon as you came in, the Gemara says they would show them a table full of different moon shapes, and they say, point to the one you saw. They're like, Rabbi Gamliel had a whole the Mush Tzunis Levanis, or hanging on this table, whatever. Yeah. Go remember, I don't know, it was this way, that way. Huh? No, but there's 2 mitzvahs. There's a mitzvah of Beis Din to calculate. It's a mitzvah in Torah, Beis Din to calculate, and there's a mitzvah for the Eden to see it. Hashem wanted, you have to kazeret the Kaddish. So we have to play the game.
If I know going in, hey guys, go out tomorrow night because this time you should be able to see it.
They could, that's interesting. I never read that. If the Beis Din would have publicized an announcement like today, it would like go on WhatsApp, guys, be outside.
They
Yeah.
knew that they're not gonna be able to see it.
Okay, guys, let's go. I don't want to lose. So half a year, again, for half a year, the window is less than 9 degrees, no possibility, more than 15. Yes, between 9 and 15, you got to follow the rest of the Perek. However, when does that apply? When the moon finds itself between Capricorn and Gemini. That means from 270 degrees up to 90 degrees, when it's climbing north on the ecliptic. But if it was from the beginning of Cancer down to the bottom of Sagittarius, then a different window goes. If it's 10 degrees or less, it won't be seen. More than 24 degrees, not 15, more than 24. You have to go make calculations in So for half a year, the window is 9 to 15. For the other half a year, it's 10 to 24. Why the difference? Why such a big difference? So check out this picture over here. I'm going to share the screen.
This view of between Cancer and Sagittarius is any time of the year?
Yeah, because it's as long as the moon is in those mazalas.
Any time of the year.
Any time of the year.
Doesn't matter.
That's right. Look, this is a picture. That line right there is somebody in Yerushalayim. The blue dome represents their horizon, right? Whenever you're on a sphere, your horizon extends to half of the sphere. Now, notice that the person in Yerushalayim is north of the equator. When you're north of the equator, the more northerly something is, the later it takes to set on your horizon. The more southerly something is, the quicker it takes to set on your horizon. This is why in the summer, Shkia is later, because the sun is making its circles over here, so it's setting later. In the winter, the sun is making its circles down here, so sunset is earlier. The same thing applies to moonset. If the moon is in the north, it's going to set later, not 6 p.m. If the moon is in the south, it's going to set earlier. So now, follow this. This is a little bit of a complicated, I just couldn't make anything more clear here. The bottom is the principle. The Galgal Hayomi is pushing everything from east to west. The entire everything is going from east to west. This is between Gedi and To'ainim. The moon is moving east. Remember, the moon on its own path is moving away. Galgal Hayomi is pushing everything east to west. Everything set. Everything. It's going this way. It's forcing everything. But the moon and the sun are going a little bit, climbing the other way. 13 degrees per day for the moon. So essentially, the moon is moving towards the east. But during this half a year, it's also towards the north. We call that in English northeast. That's going to cause it to set even later. In other words, if I'm pushing you to the west and you're climbing to the east, you're going to set later than I want you to, right? But if you're going to the northeast, you're going to set even later. Because on my horizon, you're going to all areas that are later to the horizon. You're going, first of all, east, pushing you away, and you're going to the north, which is pushing you later. But if you're going to the east and to the south, well, then, yeah, you'll set later because you're combating my western movement, but you're going to set relatively earlier than had you been going north. So when the moon is in any of these 6 mazalos, besides for going east, it has a northerly orientation. So because it has a northerly orientation, it's going to be setting later than later. Later because it's going east, and even later because it's going north. Therefore, in that half a year, once the distance between the sun and the moon is 15 degrees, you're for sure going to see it. Because that distance means that the sun has gotten far enough from the moon that the moon will be seen. But in the southern half of the year, when the moon is climbing downwards, it has both an easterly and a southerly orientation, is going to the southeast in this picture. It's heading towards down here. So it's going to be setting a bit later than the sun, but it's going to be earlier later, not later. Hence, a larger window is required. It has to be to 24 degrees to be for sure possible. Once you're at 24, it may or may not be setting. We have to have the whole period to go. That's what underlies halacha gimel and halacha dalet. Northerly orientation, it's setting later and even later. Southerly orientation, it's setting later, but not that much later. Verstehst?
Is the sun also an incline?
No, the sun is following. Well, the sun is on incline because of the ecliptic, right? But the moon, that's not what we care about right now. Okay? Gewaldig. You get what you get, you don't get upset. Okay. So let's say we're in the middle of, so we found this window, okay? So we got to 10 to 15 or 10 to 24. We needed to make more adjustments. What are these adjustments? These are the following calculations. So you can see in this pedic over here, in this slide over here, what's happening in this pedic? Couple of steps. We begin with the Eirech Rishon and the Reichav Rishon. So there's going to be one adjustment that's going to adjust them both. It's called the Shinui Mare. The Shinui Mare HaEirech always subtracts from the Eirech Rishon and leads to the Eirech Sheni. Over here also, the Shinui Mare HaReichav makes the Reichav more southerly and reaches the Reichav Sheni. That's where we're heading to right now. Then it's going to go to Eirech Shlishi, but Reichav never goes past the second one. Eirech Shlishi, Eirech Revi, till we get to this. That's what we want, the Kesher Sara'iyah. That's our favorite guy. But now we're going to make the first adjustment called the Shinui Mare, the difference in sighting. Okay? Let's see it. Let's see in Halacha Hey. He's bringing into the air. Check out which mazel the moon is in. If it's in Aries, you have to subtract 59 degrees from the initial longitudinal distance. Share the mazel of Taurus, take away 1 degree. In Gemini, take away 58. In Mazel Satan and Cancer, Tigram and Eirech Shlesh Rabbi Chalak 43 degrees. In Yeb Mazel Arye, Tigram and Eirech Shlesh Rabbi Chalak 43 degrees. It's all subtractions. Everything is subtractions. In Yeb Mazel Basula, Tigram and Eirech Shlesh Rabbi Chalak, take off 37 degrees. Minutes, I'm sorry. In Yeb Mazel Miznayan, Tigram and Eirech Rabbi Shlesh Chalak 34 minutes. In Yeb Mazel Akrav, Tigram and Eirech Rabbi Shlesh Chalak 34 degrees. In Yeb Mazel Kashes, Tigram and Eirech Shlesh Chalak in Yeb Mazel Gedi, Tigram and Eirech Rabbi Chalak. In Yeb Mazel Dli, Tigram and Eirech Shlesh Chalak. In Yeb Mazel Dagim and Pisces, Tigram and Eirech Shmena B'Chavish Chalak. And whatever remains from the Eirech, till after you subtract the Chalakim, this is called Eirech Sheni. Why are we making the subtraction? Why are we taking away this Chalakim? The true position of the moon is still not, isn't the place where you're going to see it. There's a difference in sighting, both in longitude and in latitude. That's called the Shinui Mare. The Shinui Mare of the longitude always is subtracted from the oirech. As we said, what does this mean? Look in this slide over here. This is shinui mada ha'oirech. Everything we said till now, all calculations, talking about viewing things from Earth, right? Everything's from Earth, it's correctly to Earth, but that was all calculated as though you're viewing it from the dead center of the Earth's ball. However, nobody is there. People are on the surface of Earth in Yerushalayim. Now, the radius of Earth's sphere is about 4,000 miles, right? This is a 4,000 mile difference. You got to factor that in. And because it's Yerushalayim, so the Rambam just tells you that the moon will always be seen more westerly. He says east, progressing on the Lamazales. He says west, going backwards, closer to the sun. So the view from the center of Earth would be the white line. You think the moon is over here. But on the surface of Earth, it's really going to be over here. That just decreased the window of distance between the sun and the moon. Smaller distance, less chance of sighting. So we got to know this is a big thing. This could really affect the Re'iyah.
That was just read inside.
That was Hey and Vav. That was subtracting from Eirech Rishon to reach the Eirech Shein. Eirech Rishon will be the initial distance from here to here. But now with the truer distance, we're getting to here. This is the distance now. So we see that the Shinui Mada of Eirech, longitude always gets subtracted. Avol Shinui Mada Horoichav Halachazayin, but the Shinui Mada created in the latitude, the principle is not adding or subtracting. The principle is that it always gets more southerly. Remember, the moon could either be inclined north or south to the ecliptic. However, the ecliptic is only inclined 23.5 degrees to the equator, with the moon a maximum of 5 degrees more. 23.5 plus 5 is 28.5. That means the maximum northerly distance is 28.5. Guess where Yerushalayim is on the map? 32 degrees from the equator. So essentially, a person looking out from Yerushalayim is looking down on the moon. He's always above the maximum inclination of the moon. So for him, the moon always looks more southerly. See, if me and you are relative levels, I see you at this level. But if I'm standing up here, I'm always going to see you looking lower. So I'm always going to think you're more south. So even if the Reichav is inclined to the north, it's going to look more south. If it's inclined to the south, it'll look even more south. That's why sometimes you're going to add to the Reichav or subtract. If it's a northerly Reichav, you're going to subtract, making it more south. If it's southerly Reichav, you're going to add, making it more south. It's all about making it more south. Verstehst?
Yeah.
You get what you get, you don't get it. That's the entire principle here. If it was a northerly inclination, you're going to have to subtract a little bit and make it more south. If it was a southerly inclination, you're going to add more distance. Whatever you reach after that, is called the second reichad. You can see it here in this slide, essentially. This slide, you see the maximum inclination of the moon is 5 degrees to the north, and Yerushalayim is out here. So Yerushalayim is always looking down at the moon, seeing it more southerly, and therefore you have to subtract.
These slides.
Me, these ones, not these ones are made by Rabbi, and he has a 3D program that you should really check out. Okay. How much is that correction? Halacha ches. The kama he machalakim shemisifin agirnes, and how much do we have to add or subtract? Im yiyarech b'mazel tle. If the moon is at Aries, so it's not really inclined much. Tisha chalakim, just 9 degrees. Im yiyah b'mazel 9 minutes. Im yiyah b'mazel shayar chalakim 10 minutes. Im yiyah b'mazel ta'imim shisha chalakim 16 minutes. Im yiyah b'mazel sarton shiva v'esel chalakim 27. Im yiyah b'mazel aryeh shmesh chalakim 38. Im yiyah b'mazel besula arba 40 chalakim. Im yiyah b'mazel miznayim shisha 40 chalakim is 46. Im yiyah b'mazel akrab 5 chalakim is 45. Im yiyah b'mazel keshas 40 chalakim is 44. Im yiyah b'mazel gedi shisha chalakim is 36. Im yiyah b'mazel gli 10 chalakim. Im yiyah b'mazel dagim 12 chalakim. That's the number that you have to always add or subtract. Once you know these numbers, either add or subtract. But again, the principle is make it more south. You already know, you will know if it's north or south. Figure out how much that's become, and keep it with you. Keep it with you, not because we care about that, but because fractions of this reichav are going to become the correction for a further part of the oirech. We're going to use fractions of the reichav to further correct the longitudinal difference. So it's important to know how much this became. By the way, just an interesting principle, this Shinei Ma'ara HaReichav can cause to convert the angular distance from north to south. Since you're always making it more south, so let's say that the Reichav was just 10 minutes north. By adding it and making it more south, you may have converted the distance from north to south. Because for you, it's always going to be more southerly. You're always seeing it more south. Anyway, if you didn't get that, that's fine. All right. Now, we come up to the next correction. So we have the Eirech Sheni and we have the Reichav Sheni. The Eirech Rishon, we subtracted a little bit for the view from Earth, reaching a smaller Eirech. The Reichav either got bigger or smaller, but it got more southerly for sure. That's the bottom line. Now, Halacha Yud. The Achar Kach, then Tachzer B'tikach Min HaReichav HaSheni Hazeh Miktsasa. You must take a fraction of this new Reichav, this new latitudinal difference. Why are we taking a fraction? Because the moon tilts a little bit in its circle. Let me try to explain what this means. Here, look at this slide. This blue line represents where you will see the moon from Earth after it's been adjusted from Yerushalayim. However, you can see there's a 5 degree, let's call it, or there's an angle between it and the ecliptic. It's not running directly on the ecliptic. It's northerly inclined, right? So if we wanted to identify which degree is the moon on the ecliptic, we're essentially drawing a line, let's call it a figurative line, from the point of Reichav down to Gagal Mazal. Oh, it's here. It's at 50 degrees, right? Oh, well, because this is inclined, so we're thinking of it it's straight for the moon, right? On the axis of the ecliptic, it's a straight line. But you're exactly right. That's this adjustment right here. Since we are on Earth, and for us, these are the lines of longitude, we have to draw the line straight to match the longitude so that we know which degree is actually setting on the horizon with the moon. We can't say the moon is here, because the moon, which is up here, is going to reach the horizon at this point.
The white is the angle from the moon, and the blue is the angle from the Earth.
That's right. Blue is always Earth, man. So if we were only worried about the moon, we draw the white line. But since we're worried about Earth, we have to know which degree on the ecliptic is setting with the moon. So if it's a northerly Reichav, in this case, it's more northerly inclined to the ecliptic, instead of drawing the line diagonally this way, we draw the line straight down this way. And you can see that now it got behind. Right? It got, well, you call it behind, you call it closer to the sun. Closer to the sun. That's the distance there between Eirech Sheni and Eirech Shlishi. This becomes Eirech Shlishi. Here is an example of a southerly Reichav. It's southerly inclined to the ecliptic. This would be the diagonal line. This would be the straight line matching longitude. Here it gets longer, further from the sun. So a northerly Reichav, again, a northerly Reichav causes a shorter Eirech Shlishi, shorter distance. Southerly Reichav causes a longer distance. But this is only true half a year, when the moon has a northerly orientation. When the moon is climbing upwards on the mazoles, so then northerly inclination means shorter, southerly inclination means longer. But if the moon is climbing downwards, then northerly inclination actually makes it longer and southerly makes it shorter. Hence the Rambam says, how much is this little bit that you're taking? What are we taking over here? From the beginning of Aries to 20 degrees in, and we're on the other side until 20 degrees. Take 2/5 of the Reichav. He's just talking in terms of fractions, because that's again this distance. This comes into this distance. Take 2/5. If it's between 20 on Aries and 10 on Taurus, or 20 on Libra till 10 on the Scorpio, you take 1/3 of the Reichav. From 10 of Taurus to 20 of Taurus, take 1/4 of the Reichav. From 20 to the end of Taurus, from 20 of Scorpio to the end, From 10 degrees till there, take a sixth of the Reicha. From those two locations, take a 12th. Take a quarter of the six. That's the 24th essentially. Take a don't take anything. There's no difference. Take a quarter of a six, 24th. Take a half of a six, a 12th. Take a sixth again. Take a take a quarter. Take a third. Take 2/5. Whatever you're taking off, this fraction that you're deducing is called the Magal HaYarech, the circle of the moon. In other words, aligning it with our longitude. The Acharkach, then you check out the Reicha. See if it's northerly or southerly. As I said before, if it's northerly, you have to subtract and makes the distance smaller. If it was southerly, you add it, making it longer. Again, when is that said? Only half a year long. From Capricorn till Gemini. But if it's from Cancer till Sagittarius, if it's the opposite. Northerly inclination means an additional eidach. Then you subtract it. Whatever the eidach sheni comes after you add or subtract, is the third distance in longitude. In other words, aligning the moon with the longitude, with the Earth longitude. V'dan, you should know, if there's no tilt, and the calculation told you not to take anything from the second reichav. Then the second is the third. You just go to the next step. So that was basically compensating for the moon relative to the longitude of the Earth, which part will set on time. Okay, now we're going to the Eidach Haravi, Halacha Yud Beis. The Achakach Tachzer B'Tira Ha'Eidach Hashlishi Azeh V'Hu HaMailish B'Nei Eidach V'Hashemesh. Now you have the exact amount of degrees between the sun and the moon. Once the sun sets, you know exactly how much distance you have till the moon sets. There's one more adjustment that has to be made. So now you see where it is. If it's on the two ends, two meeting points of the ecliptic, Pisces and Aries, the two beginning points, Pisces and Aries next to each other. You add a sixth to the Eidach HaShlishi. You add a fifth. You add a sixth. The two ends, leave it as it is. Don't take away or add anything from it. If Mazel Aryeh, take away a fifth. And you have to subtract a third. And whatever the Eidach will be after you add or subtract or leave it alone, is called the Eidach Revi. Why are we making this adjustment? Because if I can see it over here. Yeah, this principle again. When you're on Yerushalayim, the more northerly a star is, the later it will set. The more southerly a star is, the earlier it will set. Depending on which mazel the moon finds itself in, the moon is going to set either later or earlier because it's with those northerly or southerly mazalas. So if it's in a northerly mazel, you have to add to the Eidach Shlishi. You have to give it a little more time till it sets. If it's in a southerly mazel, you have to give it a little less time till it sets. That's this adjustment here. And then in the end of Halacha Yud Beis, the Achar Kach Tachzarech Reicha V'Yareach Harish, and also go latitudinally, We take away 2/3 of it always. You always subtract it. Sorry, no, you take it. Take 2/3. This is called the angle of the height of the country. Again, because you're in Yerushalayim, you're north of the equator. So the inclination of the moon is going to have an influence on when it sets. First, there's the moon on the mazolis. If it's a northerly mazolis, it sets later. Southerly, it sets earlier. Then the moon itself you have to account for. If the moon itself is inclined further north, it will set even later. If it's inclined south, it will be earlier. So these two are adjustments for the northerly and southerly location of the moon. If it's north, you add that amount to the fourth longitude. If it's southerly, then you subtract it. Whatever that comes to after you add or subtract, is called the final arc of sighting, and that's the number that you want. And before we go into that, the Rambam gives us a practicality of everything we just said before. We want to know, will the moon be seen or not? So get the place of the sun, place of the moon, and the inclination of the moon, north or south. We already let you know. The true position of the sun is 7 degrees into Taurus. It's 18 degrees into Taurus. It's a southerly inclination. It's 3 degrees south. Now, follow the steps. You subtract the moon, the sun from the moon. You show it we have 11-degree difference. Since the moon is in the nozzle of Taurus, the view from Earth will cause a more westerly difference of 1 degree. If they subtract it from the first longitude, you now have only 10 degrees. And also the Reichav will make it the Reichav more south, by 10 minutes. You have to add the Shini Amada, you now have 4 degrees and 3 chalakim of distance, since it's 18 degrees into Taurus, so you take a quarter of the second Reichav, again to adjust with the horizon, so that adjustment will become Maila achas, the chilek echad 1 degree and 1 minute. Lefisha aimed at the kimpashnis. We don't care about the seconds. Well, lefisha recha ve'erech dreimi makam erech hamiti b'divrei sartan. And since we follow the rules, it's of a southerly inclination on the first half of the year, or northerly orientation. You have to add it to the second eidech. You have the third eidech now back at achas esrei milas, back to 11 degrees. Shmein abesim chalakim simani at alef chaves. Because it's in Mazel of Taurus again, you have to add another 5th to adjust for the northerly Mazalis, so we're going to set later. Now it's 2 degrees and 18 chalakim. Another 8 chalavi is 13 degrees. However, we take 2/3 of the Reichav. Who the final adjustment is 2 degrees. Well, the you have to subtract it from the Eidech Hashlishi, from the Eidech Haravi. We go back to 11 degrees and 11 minutes. So after the entire period, you see, we began at 11:27. Now we're down to 11:11. With all the back and forth, the whole difference is not really that big. It's a tiny difference that comes out in total. Yud Aleph, Yud Aleph. The Zuhi Keshes of the Iya. This is the final arc of sighting on this night. You can know in every night, any night that you want to know forever. So now you have the final arc of sighting, and you have to figure out whether you're going to be able to see the moon. So here's what the Rambam gives you, and I'll give it to you in simple English. The magic number is 22. That's the magic number. Okay, we have the Eidech Rishon, which is the initial longitudinal difference in the sun and the moon. And now, after this entire period, we have the Kesher Sariyah, the final arc of sighting. If those two distances equal 22 degrees, you're good.
Exactly.
Or more. Less, no sighting. So I've already spilled the beans. In the Rambam's case, since we began at 11:27, I went off at 11:11. 11 plus 11 is 22. So we're going to be able to see the moon. So you have to compare. But look at Tezvav. The Achash Teitze Keshazu. Once you have the final arc of sighting, Tavin Ba, take a look at it. Vida, know the following. She'im Tia Keshazu Iya Tesha Ma'aseh Pakas. If it's 9 degrees or less, E Efsher, not us. E Efsher Shira B'chalai results. Impossible to be seen in all of Israel. Im Tia Keshazu Iya Yes Al Arba Shemaz. If it's more than 14, E Efsher Shelo Yira Via Galil Chalai results. Impossible. It won't be seen. It's going to be revealed to everybody. Al Chatazayin Im Tia Keshazu Iya Mitchilas Ma'ala Asiris. Ad Seif Ma'as Arba. But if it's between 10 and 14, Tarech, and you compare Keshazu Iya Ela Eira Charish, and you compare your final arc to your original longitude, but you'll know from the limitations that I imposed upon it, you'll know whether it could be seen. They're the final limits of the sighting. What are the limits of sighting? If the final arc is between 9 and 10, and the first one is 13 or more, so 9 plus 13 equals 22. But if it's less than that, if either one are less than that, will not be seen because you can't reach 22. If the keshes of the iya is from the end, from more than 10 to the end of 11, or more than 11, the also 12 or more, so more than 22. Less than that, will not be seen.
22 what?
Degrees. It's just a way to remember it. Total amount of degrees. The first longitude and the last longitude.
Yeah.
If their combined numbers equal 22 degrees, yeah, you'll be able to see it. This is 9 and this is 13. This is 10 and this is 12. It's all the same. If it's between 11 and 12 on the final arc, over here it's 11 too. Again, 11 and 11 is 22. Less than that, or the less than that, will not be seen. Also just today, if it's 13 on this side, and here it's 10 on that side, will also be seen. Or if either one is less than that, will not be seen. If it's from 13 or more, the and then the Eidach side, it's the 9 in the initial longitude, will certainly be seen. The ad kam seif keeps, and this is the end. In other words, once you reach this point, you have to have your answer. You'll know if it'll be seen or not. There's no further calculations. Ketzad, how will we apply it to our case? We're going to reach the conclusion in the Cheshbon of Keshes Sariyah, Achas Esrei Mailas, Achas Achalakim 11 and 11. Kameshia Data, as you already know. Lefisha Isa Keshes Sariyah, Bein Esrad Arba Esrad, it was between 10 and 14. Arachnu Isa, we compare it El Ha'edeh Charisha. And Kvaya Data, you already know. Sha'edeh Chazeh, Belil Zeh, Achas Esrei Mailas. The original longitude is what? 11 degrees. Since the Keshes were also 11 degrees, so they're both more than 11. We can know that it will certainly be seen based on the limitations that we've imposed. The Keshes and Eidach, so you can compare with every final arc of sighting with its original Eidach. All right. You've already seen from all of these actions, how many calculations there are, how many additions, how many subtractions. There's a whole headache over here. And that's after we've worked a ton, we've given you the easy way out. Till we came up with easy ways that don't have so much depth to them. So the moon has many incongruities, major deviations in its orbit. We know when the sun sets. We don't know when the moon sets. Or the sun itself knows when it sets. The moon itself doesn't know when it sets. The moon is just going around and around in circles, doesn't know where it is.
What
The
was the last thing you said?
Say two interpretations. Either it means that we don't know when it sets because it's so confusing, or the moon itself is confused by its own headaches. In other words, the moon's own orbits make it confused. Said, sometimes there's a long distance between the sun and the moon, and other times it's short. As you can see from these calculations, sometimes you add and subtract, take catches at the ear until you reach the arc of sighting, and even the arc of sighting itself could be sometimes it's long, it's short. the distance is all that matters. Now the reason for all these calculations and why we take off this, why we add this, and how each thing is known, and the proofs for each of these things, is itself the wisdom of astronomy and geometry, about which the Greek philosophers have made many books. That's what we have today. But the Jewish sages' books, which tribe of Yisachar had made in days of the prophets, then they didn't reach us. Nevertheless, in other words, even though it's all Goyish sources, since they've all been proven with clear proofs, they have no fault, and nobody can think or can find fault in them. We don't care who the author was, whether it's the prophets or the nations. Right? Famous saying goes, whoever says the truth, take the truth. The truth is truth. But once the reason has been revealed, and the truth is known, they have no fault, or as the proper girsa is, we don't rely on zeha ish, on the person that said it, and he add the word ella, rather on the proof or on the reason. That's what we care about. And hence, if it's true, it's true. Who cares if it's Goyish or Yiddish? And that's the Rambam for today.
Summarize those four.
The four adjustments.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos. The four adjustments like this. You have the initial distance. Okay? Then you have the Shinui Mara Ha'erech. Because you're on the surface of Earth, not in the center. Oh, let me enlarge it. No, let me I can enlarge it over here. Is it better?
Yeah.
Here we go. Oh, Eirech Risha in here. So the Shinui Mara Ha'erech, that's because you're on the surface of Earth, not in the center. That always subtracts from the Eirech Risha, makes it smaller, distance smaller, and leads to Eirech Sheni. Then you have the Magal Ha'ereach. That uses the Reichav Sheni, it uses the latitudinal difference to either add or subtract from the Eirech Sheni, depending on where it is, north or south. You're going to draw the line to equal with the horizon to know which degree is setting with the moon. That will make it either longer or shorter, and leads to Eirech Shlishi. Then there's another correction, because we are in the north side of the northern hemisphere. That's the correction over here, that either adds or subtracts from the Eirech Shlishi, depending on which part of the ecliptic the moon is in. The point is that if it's more northerly, it sets later. Southerly, it sets earlier. Leads to Eirech Revi. And then the Nas Geiva Medina is itself using the Reichab, the latitude of the moon, to add to or subtract from Eirech Revi, and leads to Kesher Sadiyah. So first we subtract for the surface of Earth. Then we either add or subtract for where the moon is going to set on the horizon. Then again, we add or subtract for being in the north and wondering whether the moon's going to be in a northerly star or a southerly star. And again, we add or subtract for whether the moon itself is northerly or southerly inclined.
Theoretically, if someone wanted to figure this out for the city of Los Angeles,
No, it's a whole different table.
that's what I was wondering.
A whole different table. You're going to have to do all the trigonometry which brought the Rambam to these numbers. See, the Rambam is Sefer Halachas, right? What makes Kiddush HaChodesh so hard is not the halachas. It's the reason behind the halachas, which is not Rambam. Rambam is just giving you the result.
Right, and he said that at the end.
Yeah, and even the whole time, I did all the explaining. I didn't do it. He didn't do any explaining. He says, take a fifth, take a sixth, add, subtract, blah. He's just telling you the results.
What does this mean? We didn't get it from the Yisachar.
Well, we did. He didn't have the book. The book of the stuff.
We didn't have it. So where did you get all this?
Science,
From science books, from the Greeks.
math, and astronomy.
This is all trigonometry. It's all the math of triangles. So
Where did the before Rambam? Where did they get it from?
the Chachamim had certain traditions that we know. In certain matters, they had Kabbalah, but in terms of all the mathematics of it, they used Greek methodology. Ptolemy was the famous one, and he was his.
Ptolemy was the time of the Rambam. I'm saying 1,000 years before then, whatever.
They had
Well, Shmuel Kappen, right?
Shmuel, right?
Kappen. Yeah, right? He established the calendar, so he must have known all this stuff.
Of course,
Right. Where did you get it from?
his teachers.
Yeah, from science class, bro. They had to studies.
So I'm saying what brought the Rambam to write all these numbers is because he did the trigonometry behind it, right? So if you're in Los Angeles, it's a whole different set of rules. You have to figure out where your sun is, where your moon is, and how the triangles reach up to that, and then you can come up with your own systems for that.
And what is all of this sun, moon, Mashgiach, Makabah? How did that all translate into everything?
I don't know, but I'll tell you one thing for sure. What he said at the end there with the sun and the moon, I'm just thinking of moon and women and the sun and men. I don't know.
Men are simple,
That's right.
straightforward.
That's right.
The
And
moon.
women themselves don't even know what they are. That's actually like the moon.
Are we still on video?
I think you guys said that again.
They even had.
Oh, that's why you know this is the woman's holiday and the woman's cycle is corresponding to the moon. There's all these connections with women and the moon. And a woman is a makabah and the moon is also makabah.
That's right. The whole Indian of the
And that's
Mailad
all
over
tie
here.
in.
The whole Indian of the Mailad, by the way, it's the same thing. Is Isaac's still there?
Isaac, stop this. Isaac still there?
Yeah.
Huh?
The Maisa is, the whole thing is whether the moon is going to be seen or not. The whole thing is dependent on the Kabbalah of the moon.
The whole time.
Let's say 1,000 years before the Rambam.
Look,
They were counting, they were counting on the goyim, or you think they had it without them?
no. In the times of the Nevi'im, the Bnei Yisachar made Sfarim on astronomy.
Right.
These Sfarim were passed down from generation to generation in the Jewish sages. Parallel to that, there was Goyish sages making up stuff. Aristotle had a whole thing on astronomy, right? He had a whole title on that. And then, so at a certain point, we don't know when, but by the Rambam's times, these Jewish Sfarim disappeared.
Right.
All they had was, right, that's right, absolutely. Muslims were very into it. And so you had Aristotle's model of the sun and the moon.
Crazy, they had,
Yeah, and then you had, what was Ptolemy's book, the Almagest, something like that. I'm not big on this whole thing, but the point is,
Could we say that maybe with Goyish stuff, we can learn more now about Torah?
so that you have to make tomorrow, John. I'm not going to be here, but in the end of Perek Yutes, final halacha, these halachas that Rambam
Danny,
says.
listen to this, Danny,
What?
you're missing out.
So he asked me today if we could use Goyish Sfarim. So I said that in the end of tomorrow's Rambam, the end of the halachas Kiddush HaChodesh, the Rambam says that I wrote these halachas so that you don't have to look anywhere else for these things.
For these things.
For these things, but what I'm asking is, could we look at science today, for example, by going as science and say we can learn more of Torah through that, like it sounds like they did here.
Of course. What's the question?
No,
No, but you can't take on the premises of science. You can't be convinced of it. We know, Marshall, we believe in geocentricity. The Earth is the center of everything. And this whole,
And they don't.
So they believe the world's rotating on its own axis and whatever it is.
Yeah.
So we know the Rambam, so we can use them to discover more. All right, we did our best.
What is tomorrow's?
All right.